Free falling. Well, ain't this fucking magical, thought Alan as he plummeted through the atmosphere, lying backwards as his arms and legs were flailing in the wind, watching as the ship he was on crumbled and burned above him. "A little turbulence, my horse!" shouted Alan at the ship. Apparently, what happened was that the new fusion drives don't work too well at a low-gravity planet. Something about how the centrifugal ionizer gets clogged up with too many positively charged electrons due to the instruments not being correctly configured. Alan didn't really care what it was, as like when you're drowning, you don't really think about what you're going to have for dinner that night. You're thinking about your next breath. Later on, when he did find out the cause, a major case was brought against the Xeno companies for sheer incompetence, and it's currently being discussed at the Galactic Courts of Injustice Prevention. "Fucking Steve!" Alan let out with a roar. The reason that Alan was even traveling on one of the Xeno ships was that he was invited to come see Steve for a housewarming, and that Ryan Intergalactic dropped him off at the third closest space dock, requiring the use of the Xeno Continental Shuttle Ship service to actually get to his pad. After a couple more curses, Alan started to notice that he didn't feel like he was falling fast. Being able to hear himself shouting was a clue to this. He was expecting to be deafened by the wind. Deciding to face fate head-on regardless, he turned to face the ground, expecting that it would be close enough to see each Xeno that is potential for the Best Death Award via an orbital dropkick. Shockingly, Alan could still very much see the curvature of the planet he has the grace to crash over. With this new information, Alan drew 3 conclusions. 1. That either he was much farther up than originally anticipated. 2. That the gravity was weaker and thus fell slower. 3. That if there is no chance for survival, he's still going to be entered for 3K15's Best Death Award, given posthumously, of course. Alan started to look around for anything he could use to potentially save him. The first thing he saw was another one of the passengers slowly passing Alan on the inside of the race to death. The Xeno was winning, but what do you expect when you're a squid-cockroach hybrid? Hardshell and streamlined. The look of utter acceptance on this creature's eyes as it knew it was going to fall to his death warmed Alan's heart, before he saluted the bugger and started flailing his arms to turn himself midair to see what else he could find. Debris from the ship was strafing by. Chunks of varying shapes and sizes could be seen as they tumbled. Alan was starting to feel desperate. Looking around, he could also see some of the other unfortunate passengers on this doomed voyage in freefall. Well, all except one of the Xenos who just happened to be blessed with wings. Twat, thought Alan. Why did he need to use a ship when he could fly? Later on, it became apparent that the wings were just for show. As the birdie Xeno tried flapping, and instead of gracefully gliding away, started what seemed to look like a tricky 1080 kickflip corkscrew blackflip combo. The thought had also crossed his mind about moving over and grabbing onto said Xeno birdie and riding it to safety, except for the fact that it was going for the G-rank score in SSX Tricky Game. Alan was now just under halfway to hitting the ground, yet no closer to finding a solution to his predicament. The Xenos were useless. Even the fat one he spotted earlier and considered as a crash mat wasn't much use, as a piece of debris fell right through him, making him pop into a fountain of orange blood. While the scene in front of him seemed to have been written out of a Japanese samurai film, he did spot something glimmering beyond the corpse. While it didn't look like much, nothing around here looked anything remarkably useful. Alan, angling himself forward, moved forward, careful to dodge the larger debris. Upon closer inspection, he had a mad surge of adrenaline. A wide smile crept across Alan's face as he spotted a flying mobility scooter. The Egg model, to be precise. One of the best bang-for-buck scooters. These are used by the elder Xenos to get around on the planet. Decent range, slow and soft acceleration, and a good cruising altitude. "Perfect!" screamed Alan. It may not be made to go much higher than 1 kilometer or 2 of the surface, but that's all you need to decelerate from a freefall. Also, all mobility scooters come with a parachute in case of loss of power mid-flight. Generally, the things won't fly if the gauges are too low, but he's going to have to gamble that the thing is juiced before he turns himself into it. Doing the breaststroke, Alan made it over to the scooter, undid the catch, and swung open the port. Peering inside, he pulled out the middle part of the scooter assembly. "Fuck!" screamed Alan at the box. "Of course it wasn't put together. Nothing could be that simple, could it? Can't give me a break, can you?" "Why me?" Alan muttered. Alan was nearly 3/4 of the journey by now. The planet had started to get very close, and he was beginning to warm up a bit. He started to think what Steve said to him while starting up a new business. "That it's like being pushed off a cliff and having to assemble a plane before hitting the ground. It's that hard," mockingly grunted Alan. "Well, look at me now," laughing out loud. At that moment, using his boot as delicate leverage, slammed down the last part of the scooter into place. With it complete, he maneuvered himself on top of the flying scooter and pressed the start button. Nothing. Frantically, he started to hit everything in front of him. Without power, the parachute couldn't be deployed. Stomping on a foot lever, a little indicator popped up on the dash. Of course, it needs a pump the first time. While the newer models would have an auxiliary battery pack to start the scooter, this one required you to pump the starter. Looking over the side, Alan's face dragged. He was much closer than he thought. He's starting to recognize the waterways and cities of this planet. Gripping the controls with the strength of Vulcan death grips, he started to stamp on the pedal, pumping it with the speed and determination that most thrash metal drummers could only envy. The display rapidly blinking as it was reaching the threshold for ignition. "Faster! Faster!" slamming his fist into the side of his leg to relieve the cramp. The display had a solid color now, but that didn't stop Alan. Seeing the tops of the skyscrapers, he knew he was getting close. Passing the first skyscraper on his journey down, Alan was hurting. Performing what amounted to be one of the longest drum speed solos on the least interesting instrument, his muscles were screaming for a break. Only to be screamed back by Alan, telling him to shut up and keep pumping. With just 1 kilometer to go, and Alan nearly at exhausted, he stopped the pumping. Lying back in the flying mobility scooter, he pressed the start button. Immediately, the whole thing shuddered and flashed into life before running diagnostics and setup. The rage of 1,000 suns burned through him as he could see his life flashing before him as a piece of mobility apparatus must set itself up before saving a life. "Fuck this!" shouted Alan, raising his good leg and kicking the console stock in front of him. The whole scooter shook and the sides exploded out, revealing the emergency parachutes. He was saved! Climbing back onto the seat, he let out a huge sigh of relief. He had done it! Against all odds, he fell out of a ship and built a plane midair to save him! Alan was laughing so hard his sides started to hurt at the sheer ridiculousness of what he accomplished. As he gently rocked and swayed down onto the city streets below, he had a few minutes to contemplate what to do next. But whatever it was, he vowed never to fly Ryan Intergalactic again.